In the last session, we talked about relative surplus value. Relative surplus value is basically the increase of profits through improved technology, which means that you can reproduce the cost of your wages, cover the cost of your wages in a smaller number of hours of the working day, so that more hours of your working day go to producing profits. So how do capitalists do this? Marx traces the evolution of the capitalist organisation of labour through a number of stages. The first stage he calls simple cooperation. So very often capitalist production starts off with workers who work in their homes. The capitalists will come round with the materials for them to work on, maybe loans them the equipment, then comes back the next week, collects the finished work and pays them. The first stage, and Marx calls this the formal subsumption of labour to capital. That is, the labour process is not really changed from what it was before capitalist production, but it's now drawn into a relationship between worker and capitalist rather than being an individual worker working in their home at home and selling their products themselves. And the first stage beyond this, first stage in what Marx called the real subsumption of labour to capital, that is when capital really starts to transform labour, is what Marx calls simple cooperation. That is, when the capitalist brings together the workers in one factory or one office to work together, even if the physical production process, the spinning of flax or whatever, the sewing or whatever it is not changed. You bring the workers together in one place. And Marx argues that this cooperation is a fundamental building stone of all the capitalist transformations of labour. Cooperation had existed in older societies. Obviously, the pyramids were built by a lot of people working together. But as a systematic basis for production, it is specific to capitalism. So, oddly, the habits and the routines and the structures of cooperation, which are necessary for socialism, are developed by capitalism. Why is cooperation advantageous to the capitalists? In the first place, it allows for a much greater speed of the circuit of capital. You don't have to take the stuff round to somebody's house, then go back a week later to collect it with all the delays that involves. You have everybody there on the spot. You can make sure that all the supplies are there in the factory. Secondly, you economise on the overheads, physical overheads, the cost of buildings. Now, obviously, if the workers are working at home, you're not directly paying their cost of their buildings, but you have to pay them enough that they can keep the roof over their heads. Now, you have one roof over a lot of heads. And the third thing is it makes it much easier for the capitalists to supervise and control the production process, to keep workers working all the time. And the third thing is the very process of cooperation itself makes the workers work better, because they learn from each other. They tend to put pressure on each other to do the job diligently and to do it well. Even in capitalist production today, in most factories, in most offices, in most other workplaces, what keeps people working well, insofar as they do work well, is usually not enormous pressure from the management, which is very often counterproductive. It's that each worker wants not to let down their fellow worker and doesn't want to be seen in the eyes of their fellow worker as somebody who's incompetent or can't manage. And every worker generally wants to help other workers do the job well. All those things are unleashed by cooperation. The other important point which Marx makes about this is this extra productivity for cooperation, which is extra productivity of the workers, nevertheless appears in capitalist society as the property of the capitalist, because it is the capitalist who has brought the workers together. They didn't come together as a conscious cooperative decision. They were hired one by the capitalist. The power of cooperation appears as a power of capital. And this is a theme which Marx will pursue, where he will argue generally that in capitalist society, the power of technology created by workers, manifests itself socially as a power of capital.